Well, welcome to another Scotland's Choice podcast. Let's find out who's on today's episode.
Hi Drew, I'm Gordon MacIntyre-Kemp. I'm the Chief Executive of Business for Scotland, the Business and Economic Campaign for Independence, and also the leader of Believe in Scotland, the grassroots supporting independence campaigning organisation. Delighted to be here with you on Scotland's Choice podcast today.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Gordon. And before we get into the meat of this episode, could you give us a brief history of Business for Scotland and what it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, for sure. So basically, we started in 2011 when we realised there was going to be an independence referendum. That was myself and 4 or 5 other people in business that I knew supported independence. And we grew during the 2014 referendum to being 500 businesses strong, with a mailing list of 5,000 business supporters of independence. We were the largest spending campaign on either side in 2014 of the registered campaign groups. I think we spent something like £134,000 in the last 6 weeks, just as a vehicle for business people to come out for independence and say that they thought Scotland would be better off as a result of independence, etc. We did our job quite well. The majority of entrepreneurs from a poll that was done afterwards voted yes. And more people after 2014 believed that Scotland would prosper as an independent nation than when we started, probably about a 10 to 15% increase. So we delivered that side of the referendum. We didn't win, but I guess we got close enough to start again. And I think everything's changed since then. Brexit in particular, the cost of living crisis, complete and utter economic mismanagement, and a lack of care from Westminster has opened the door for another referendum. And our organisation is going to lead from the front again. And the big difference this time is that I think we're going to win independence.
I certainly agree with you there. The big thing that people use Business for Scotland for is clearly it's got such a great resource of information and commentary there for people to go and look at. So, and I'd encourage anybody to do that. But you mentioned Brexit there. The UK government's own Office for Budget Responsibility has stated that the long-term economic impact of Brexit will be at least twice that of COVID. How do you feel that Brexit has affected Scotland's economy specifically?
Well, specifically, there's a couple of things. I mean, apart from the fact that, to begin with, in particular, there was the backup of lorries, there was seafood rotting on the piers, etc. And that, and even to this day, large queues, lots of paperwork, making it more difficult to export. It's always going to hurt Scotland more. And we said this because we actually were campaigning for Remain in the Brexit referendum. And the issue is that we always felt that as the only nation with consistent surpluses and goods exported, whisky takes up about 25% of all the food and drink exports of the entire UK, etc. Our oil and gas, our manufactured goods, with on tourism, etc. With all of those exports, it was always going to hurt Scotland. Brexit was always going to hurt Scotland disproportionately hard. More people's jobs rely on exporting from Scotland. And also we're a little bit further away from the Port of Dover, therefore slow down to the Port of Dover, make it more difficult. So those sort of issues. Mm-hmm. On top of that, you've got the loss of foreign labour. And it's not just, people automatically think of, farms picking soft fruits, raspberries and strawberries, etc., that we grow in Perthshire and, Tayside, etc., on the East Coast in particular. And yes, we can't get the foreign workers. Yes, there is a real problem there as well. Hospitality, care homes, they require foreign workers. And although that it's not a complete stop, you cannot come to this country sort of situation, we do have a situation where they just don't feel welcome, so fewer and fewer are coming. But if you look at Northern Ireland, because of the Northern Ireland Protocol, which may be about to be ripped up, still really have access to the European Union. And it has a hard border, if you want to call it that, between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. But in the last quarter that are figures for, Northern Ireland's economy grew by 1.4% versus Scotland's at 0.9%. and England's at 0.6%. Wales, I think, fell about 0.3%. So you've actually got a case study there of Northern Ireland, still in the EU with a hard border with the rest of the UK, is the highest performing economy in the UK right now. The slight surprising thing about that is it never has been before.
Yeah.
It's always been the one that's performed worse. So actually, you've got a case study there as to what independence and rejoining the EU will do. But we've got inflation right across Europe, to be honest. But in terms of how it impacts on consumers, France and other nations have been able to actually cap energy prices, etc. So although inflation has happened everywhere, Brexit is part of why Britain can't deal with inflation.
And of course, those costs have been made even higher. The cost of goods have been made higher because of the delays, the red tape, the issues over the fact that it's just not worth people exporting to us, and it's harder for us to export out as well.
Yeah, and we've got the worst projected growth in the G20. I think only Russia has worst projected economic growth next year. So the UK economy is expected to flatline. We've got 7.5, I think, right now. We're projected to go to 9. About a year ago, I predicted it would be 10. So I'm still holding on to my projection of 10 for this year, topping out at 10% this year. And if inflation is going to hit that much, you're going to see interest rates go up as well for mortgages if people aren't on fixed mortgages. And so basically, we're looking at we're going into recession. Because if inflation is as high as it is, if inflation is 10%, then in the long term that damages your economy. But in the short term, it should have a little bit of growth because factory prices are going up. But for the fact that we're going to get 10% inflation with zero growth means we're not technically, but we're philosophically already in recession. The economy is flatlining. There's going to be a major correction, and it's going to affect house prices, and it's going to be quite difficult. And that is so Brexit is just simply one of the tools by which the UK government has, for some reason that we just cannot understand, unknown to ourselves, decided to dismantle the UK economy.
And you were talking about trade there. It's something I cover here at Westminster. A lot of people are perhaps unaware that the vast majority of our manufactured goods, the things we actually make in Scotland, were actually exported outside of the UK, and it's a lot of things like financial services, insurance, even renewable electricity and gas and the like that make up the bulk of the transfers to the rest of the UK. I want to follow up that question. The saying that some people in the unionist side say that becoming independent from the UK would have a similar impact to Brexit. Why is that not the case? I mean, we all know there are going to be issues and problems to overcome, but why would that not be the case in the longer term?
Well, first of all, I mentioned before the Northern Ireland situation. Now, there is an absolute case study in how having a hard border with the rest of the UK, but the Northern Ireland Agreement allowing Northern Ireland to effectively stay within the EU, to have access through Ireland to the EU, has made its economy grow. So, maybe that's why they want to dismantle that case study before the independence referendum. And the other thing is that it's a negative to leave the EU and dismantle all of those trade deals that you have, and then go and try and create trade deals from a position of weakness for all the other nations in the world. It's a positive to maintain your sovereignty, to get all the sovereignty that Westminster holds over Scotland, to get all of those fiscal levers and tools and policy tools, bring them back to Scotland and start making decisions for the benefit of Scotland, whilst also rejoining the EU and having access to the European market. So as long as we have a plan, as long as we gain sovereignty, as long as we gain access to the European market, it's going to be the exact opposite of Brexit. And that's why it's a spectacularly good idea. I do want to say, though, that there's a couple of things people say that on the unionist side of this argument, is to say, well, the Scottish independence supporters should tell the truth. They should be honest about the difficulties and the transitions. That they should say at least there's going to be some pain. And I've thought about that, and it sounds kind of reasonable request. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, actually, from day one of independence, every single decision Scotland's government makes will be for the benefit of Scotland. So from day one, everything's going to be better. From day one, we're going to be saying, no, we're not going to have that role that disadvantages our renewable sector in Aberdeen. We're going to have better policies for that. We're going to invest here. We're going to invest there. So actually, in terms of straight away, I don't see it as being painful. I see it as being a real opportunity. There will be some change. So, for instance, if you want to talk about the transition difficulties, you've got 30,000 civil servants working in England, taken out of the Scottish budgets, are paid for by Scotland already, who you're going to have to create those jobs in Scotland. DVLC in Swansea, for instance. Well, yes, so there is a little bit of transition. I wouldn't call it pain, because what I would do is I would take the DVLC in Swansea, that 450, 500 jobs that are required to process driving licences for Scottish people, and I'd put them in Dumfries. That's a transition pain. So yes, there's movement, there's buying computers, there's moving, etc. But we're going to be getting 30,000 families, on average 2 or 3 people per family, moving back to Scotland, and their money is going to be spent in Scotland. I think this is an opportunity. So I think it's just a case of unionists are very much the glass half empty type of people, aren't they?
Indeed, and I think, if you're talking about problems and issues, you only have to look at where they've taken us to just now with the decisions over Brexit, with all of the things that they've done at Westminster pretty much over the past number of years. There's very little there that you can look to celebrate. Most of it has actually taken us in a darker place. I mean, I won't go in on this discussion to talk about immigration, but just as one example, you were talking about people coming here and being able to work here and so forth. But some of the hostile environment policies that we're having to put up with are a pretty dark aspect of being in the UK at the moment. But let's carry on busting some myths, namely the one claiming that potential investment from Scotland is being put off by the talk of independence. We had, if you will recall this very well, Gordon, we had all the scare stories in 2014 about all the big businesses moving south of the border. Why is that not a credible argument?
Well, amongst other things, you nailed it right there. There were scare stories in 2014 saying Scotland's got a strong track record in inward investment. I know a bit about that. I used to work for several years. I was in the headquarters of Scottish Enterprise as a senior national economic planning executive. I worked on inward investment projects, and Scotland does extremely well for an inward investment. In 2014, they said it was all going to dry up. And when they published, after we'd voted no, they published the figures for 2014. It turned out it was a record year for inward investment. So, so many of these scare stories have actually been proven completely wrong. Not least the one that the only way to stay in the EU is to vote no. So a lot of these scare stories have fallen apart quite a bit. But actually, I think we've now had Ernst & Young, or no, you've got to call them EY now. They've changed the name. I'm showing my age there. EY do a survey every year, and Scotland has had 4 years of continuous growth. I believe this last set of figures for the 2021 period was a 14% increase in inward investment projects and 125% increase in inward investment jobs. These companies that are coming here, and that's out of my window there, you can see, out of the dirty window there, you can see the King's Theatre in Glasgow. You've got a lot of financial companies coming to Glasgow, Morgan Stanley, etc., thousands of jobs in single offices. These companies are very much aware. They're not going to go, oh, is there a possibility Scotland might become independent? They have even known, I believe the risk guys at Morgan Stanley have even said, yeah, we know you're probably going to become independent. We don't care. Because they're multinational companies. And if you said to them, we're not going to be part of the UK, but this is the border arrangement we'll have with the UK, but we plan to rejoin the EU, they'll go, oh, there's benefits for that. It's change. We might not really want change, but you know what? We can make that work fine. And so they've done a risk analysis of coming here, and they're still coming in record numbers. So it's an absolute complete myth. Yeah.
Scotland has a range of different sizes of business. Famously, we have a very strong entrepreneurial economy with a lot of smaller, medium-sized businesses. With all that you've just said in mind, what are some of the ways that independence would benefit businesses of all sizes in Scotland?
I think that London's emphasis on big corporates. As far as they're concerned, big corporates, PLCs, London City investments, finance, hedge funds. So many of the of the, I was going to say the Chancellor's an ex-hedge funder, but things are changing quite quickly. So he's not, as of the day, it's not. But so many of the ministers come from investment backgrounds, etc., and they live in that bubble and they only think about that. Whereas Scotland's economy, the vast majority of Scotland's economy, is small to medium-sized businesses. It's entrepreneurs. It's people starting businesses, taking risks, risking losing their houses, creating jobs for first 5, 10, 20, 30, 100 people, etc., and eventually having worked really hard, they get the fruits of the labour, and that's where a lot of our entrepreneurs come from, which is why Business in Scotland exists, because so many entrepreneurs that started the businesses from scratch became wealthy, but they're entrepreneurs. They see opportunities. That's what the word means. Mm-hmm. They look for opportunities, and they see independence as an opportunity. Certainly now, more and more people are seeing independence as a potential opportunity. The problems that they have is that they're fighting fires every day because of Brexit and inflation and just increased costs, etc. So how would it benefit businesses of all sizes? I think we can get rid of the corporate PLC focus and actually start focusing on these entrepreneurial businesses. Start doing what Germany does. Germany has this economic plan based around what they call the Mittelstand, which is the middle-sized businesses. And that is the engine of Germany's growth, the engine of its employment, the engine of its innovation. That's what we should have here, where we should be concentrating here. We need to invest in renewables, and Westminster's not interested in renewables because if you want to, we have 1% of the UK's of Europe's population, but about 25% of its renewable potential, energy potential. That's an even better position than we were in with oil and gas. Mm-hmm. So basically, we need to invest in that and transition from oil and gas to renewables. Westminster looks at that and says, well, we have to invest in Scotland, though let's build nuclear power plants in England mm-hmm. for all that money. And so basically, our biggest opportunity is just being left unfulfilled. We've got to start investing in high-tech businesses. We've got to invest more in close-to-market research and development. That's not what big corporations do. And the thing is that if small companies grow their businesses by 10%, then they go out and they employ more people to meet the needs of more customers. If large companies grow their business by 10%, they pay bigger dividends and they buy robots. They get rid of workers. Yeah. So, the emphasis in Scotland has to be, sure, there's always going to be big corporates, but the emphasis of where we think there's real added value should be in small businesses. And of course, the biggest opportunity is rejoining the EU. Yeah. I believe we should maintain the pound after independence. It's crashed now. I'm going to try, off the top of my head, I'm going to try and remember. I think it's gone down in the last 12 months, something like 14 or 15%. And, it was almost $2 to the pound in 2007, and we're now at 119, 118, something like that. So, we're seeing the pound drop, and that's one of the things that's driving inflation. And even if you're an exporter, it doesn't really help because manufactured export, it's great for whiskey because everything's made and grown in Scotland and then exported. But if you're a manufacturer, you're buying components in China, then the falling pound means your component costs are going up. So it's not as simple as people seem to think it is. So yeah, there's lots of benefits for businesses, small to medium-sized companies, etc. We can start growing our economy. We should be looking at 3.5 to 5% growth the year after independence, as opposed to 0, which is kind of predicted now over with the UK.
Mm. Well, Gordon, we talked earlier about some of the scaremongering of 2014. I want to move on to some of the promises that were made in 2014, and particularly the infamous vow. Now, you'll remember as well as I do, this promised extensive further powers to be delivered in a timely manner. Since then, we've seen some tax levers transferred to Holyrood, along with some very, very limited social security administrative powers. I get a lot of stick for saying that, from unionists, for saying that they haven't delivered on the vow. Do you think the Westminster parties can genuinely say that these were delivered?
So the issue about the vow is it was actually from Gordon Brown. It wasn't from the government, and therefore they didn't feel that they needed to live up to those promises.
Well, David Cameron was a signatory, though. He had 3 days after the vow in the morning of the referendum. Yeah. Cameron made his famous English votes for English laws speech at Downing Street, didn't he?
Absolutely, but it wasn't something. It wasn't a law that was passed. It wasn't something that was guaranteed. It was simply a politicians lie just before a referendum. And all of the promises they made, such as roaming fees on mobiles will come back, that was a scare story, etc. That food prices go up. And all of these things are happening. And they said energy prices would go up. They said we'd be out of the EU unless we stayed in the EU. So basically, unless we stayed in the United Kingdom. So basically, all of the things that they were saying have now failed to materialise. There has been some extra powers, but just as they've given us some powers, with the other hand, they're taking other powers away. They're taking away the human rights. Etc. And I think there's a real issue here that you have Westminster saying, "Oh, don't worry, we're taking back control. We're going to make things better for the UK economy by taking away your basic human rights, your basic workers' rights, and not applying safety standards that are standard across Europe, etc. like that." So actually, what it's clear that they're doing is they're creating a I don't want to say dystopian future or right-wing neo-economic dystopian future. And some people might think that's exactly the way to go. I happen not to, and most entrepreneurs and all of our business members are totally against that sort of approach. But that's the danger of where we're going. And to get there, there's going to be an economic crash first in order to allow them to force changes on the United Kingdom. So we've got a situation where the economic approach of the UK government is just failing completely. They've offered us some powers, but we haven't got the powers we need. We haven't got the powers to run our own economy the way we want to invest massively in renewables, to boost research and development. We don't have the powers to change immigration rules and get the right manpower, women power as well, into our country. So essentially, the powers they've given us are just a few little tick boxes to say they've done something, when actually we need real substantial powers in the world that we've got right now. It requires us to be making the right decisions for Scotland, not crazy decisions that are only any good for the City of London, and even then maybe not.
Yeah, my issues with that promise, with those powers that were not really transferred to Scotland as they promised, was that they were built up to be told that this was going to be federalism, at least the best they could get within the UK setup. And not only did we find that, when I was elected in 2015 and the Scotland Act was going through, that every single amendment by the Scottish MPs, and include others as well that were not in the SNP, although there was only 3 at that time, was rejected by the UK government. They were just rejected out of hand. But most importantly, even though there were some powers transferred, action since then, like the Internal Market Act, have been a betrayal of that, because they've just simply given the UK government the ability to override the powers of the Scottish Parliament. So for me, that's a real failure of the vow. But we've already established, though, Gordon, about, going back to business, we've already established how important rejoining the EU is for the Scottish economy. And recently, Labour has given up and vowed to make Brexit work. So they've adopted the tagline that's been used by the Tories. Yeah. Keir Starmer has also categorically ruled out working constructively with the SNP to oust the Tories. Do you think, in your view, that it shows that whether red or blue, Westminster parties are essentially the same and simply don't have the best interests of Scotland at heart?
You could absolutely well, first of all, I don't think any Westminster party has the best interests of Scotland at heart. And frankly, they shouldn't do. We are 8.4% of the UK population. They have to govern for London and the South East, where most people live. That's how you get elected. It's the engine of the UK economy. So actually, that's just an imbalance that needs to be corrected. We need to make decisions here. Devolution helped. Independence will help further. But yet, any party of any colour making decisions in Scotland for the benefit of Scotland will be significantly better for Scotland than any party of any colour making decisions for the benefit of London and the South East. Yeah. And that there is independence in a nutshell. Independence is normal. It's how countries work all over the world. Scotland is a country. The UK is not a country. It's a union. It's a political and economic union. And there's no reason why, if we end the political union, that we can't continue to trade. Northern Ireland has shown that that can happen, but we can also improve our trade elsewhere. So yeah, I think that as far as Keir Starmer goes, I mean, I always forgot his name there. I had to remind myself what his name was.
Officially, it's Sir
not
Keir
relevant.
Starmer, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'd never give anybody the sirs. But if he's not going to be. I do not believe he will win.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson may not lead the Conservatives into the next general election. That's pretty obviously now becoming something a lot more likely over the last couple of days with all the resignations of Sunak and Javid and about everybody else. But if they replace Johnson with someone else, what they're going to find? They're going to find someone who can appeal to Scotland? No. The only people that can replace them are going to be more right-wing, care less about Scotland, but not be as humorous and entertaining to watch. So basically, they've nothing to offer Scotland at all. And I just don't see the situation getting any better, even if they dump Johnson.
So it's been really great having you on the podcast. One final question that we ask all our guests on Scotland's Choice. If you could make a policy or change an existing one, which we currently can't due to the fact that we're tied to the Westminster system, what would it be and why?
Okay, it would actually be corporation tax. I'm going to do this very much from a business point of view. Corporation tax, 19% right now for larger corporations. Moving up to 25% next year, I think in April. Smaller corporations or smaller businesses with lower profits can still get 19%. The trouble is with raising corporation tax is what you do is you actually raise tax evasion, you raise offshoring. They'll never pay it.
Yeah.
You won't actually see an increase in the revenues you gain from that. And all it does is it moves taxation around from the UK to other countries, etc. The UK tax laws are the most complex in the world, and therefore the easiest to get round. I think that's quite deliberate as well. So what would I do? I'm a big champion of the well-being economic approach, and the well-being socio-economic approach is something I think we were the first business for Scotland and I think tank economics was the first to really map out what that means if you actually to look at it as an alternative to socialism or to capitalism, etc. And the well-being approach would probably have what I would call a benefit corporation tax. And that is to say, fair enough, the UK is going to move our tax before independence up to 25% for large corporations. What I would do is I would get those large corporations in a room and I'd say, you don't need to pay 25%. We're not going to lower corporation tax, but what we're going to do is we're going to give you benefit corporation tax credits if you contribute to the well-being of our country. If you hire lots more young people, lots more disabled people, if you hire people, females in senior roles and get gender balance right, if you invest a certain amount of profit in close to market research and development, if you clean up your industry and if you actually invest in renewables or you invest in anti-pollution techniques, etc., if you increase your exports, if you do all of these things that match the well-being, if you engage with your local community, if you do get your people doing charity work, if you plant trees, etc., all the sort of things, we'll give you tax credits. And if you do all of those things, then we, including paying the real living wage, not the UK's fake living wage, but the government's fake living wage, but the real living wage, then if you do that, we'll give you tax credits and we can get your tax down to maybe even 15%. Making us a low corporation tax country. But if they do all of those things, then our social security costs will halve. People in poverty will disappear. People will have good jobs. People will have training. Our workforce will be better trained, better educated. Our economic growth will go through the roof. Our foreign currency reserves, our exports will go through the roof. So even though we're saying to them, don't avoid tax, pay your tax, but do these behaviours, and you will end up paying less than you do in the rest of the United Kingdom. And we can build a well-being economy together in which your company can thrive. I think that's kind of what independence is all about. It's about thinking differently, thinking not what last century needs, but what next century, what this century we're living in, the challenges we face, especially with the environment. What way of running our economy do we need to bring in to make that work? And the wellbeing approach is that, and that's how I would handle the tax as well.
And what a way to believe in Scotland. Gordon MacIntyre-Kemp from Business for Scotland, thank you very much indeed for joining us today on the Scotland's Choice podcast.
Thanks for having me, Drew.